I see some regulars on the call. Welcome. All right, so we are online. We'll give it another minute here. Let's see if people come in. Let's see. And I know we're live streaming as well on YouTube. So for those who are on YouTube, welcome too. I know you're dialing in from different parts of the world today. Very excited to have you all. All right, as people are coming in, first of all, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Our goal for today is to provide you with an AMA, but by Juan himself. In the last couple of weeks, obviously a lot has happened and a lot of good stuff is coming down the pipeline. And so what we wanted to do today is walk you through the view on the current market dynamics, but also more importantly, talk a little bit more about all the great product features that are coming out with our new Filecoin release. And we will have Juan present today for 40 to 45 minutes, and we'll have questions, 5 to 10 minutes time of questions. If you have any questions during the event, please add them in the chat. We will answer them as we go, or we'll keep those questions for Juan till the end. My assumption is there will be a lot of questions, and there's a lot of good stuff to talk about today. So I'm very excited to see everyone joining for this. And this is actually as a response to a lot of you have been asking, by the way, have been asking for the latest and greatest roadmap overview. So that's something we wanted to address today. And then also in general, what other programs, activities are we driving with Protolabs and the Filecoin Foundation to help the ecosystem, because that's super crucial that we keep supporting the ecosystem and help grow the network as a whole. So without further ado, we have Juan today. Welcome, Juan, and thanks for spending your time and addressing the ecosystem here today, because there's a lot of people that want to hear from you. And so with that, I'm going to give you the power to present.
Great. Thanks so much for the intro, Stefan. I'm going to share my screen. Can you let me know if you can see that?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Excited to be here talking to folks in the community. I have a lot of things to go through. I've sort of compiled this together from a lot of the questions that I've been getting over the last 2 to 6 weeks about various different things going on across the project. Quick note that a lot of this stuff is coming from different updates and roadmaps from different teams. So it may not be the most up-to-date info, but it's kind of like what I was able to pull together from different roadmaps. Just in case we have any newcomers to the community, Filecoin is a decentralized storage network designed to store humanity's most important information. It is a crypto-powered storage network. We aim it to be the storage network of Web3. It's a large-scale system that involves many different components. It is a large-scale protocol and network. It involves a blockchain. It uses that to build a decentralized market. From that, we can create a decentralized storage cloud and build an application platform. It is mediated with a decentralized economy. It has a large-scale ecosystem. It kind of brings all of that together to create this powerful open service that anyone can participate in, anyone can provide storage in, and so on. And so there's a ton of different groups working across many different parts of this large-scale ecosystem, and you'll see kind of many different things changing and upgrading and improving over time in different parts. Just a quick snapshot, the Filecoin network has now passed 16 exabytes of capacity, which is an enormous amount of storage. There's about 4,000 registered storage providers on the chain. Some of these are run by the same organizations, of course, but there's a very large number of entities providing storage in the network. There's many hundreds of organizations building applications and systems on top of the network. And there are thousands of projects entering the ecosystem and a massive developer community. This is a current system map of kind of how the network is shaped at the moment, and kind of we'll go through different components here and kind of give some quick view into kind of what's been going on over the last 6 months and so on, and kind of like what roadmap is on different segments here. So I'll start with source providers. Here you can see the little key that shows kind of highlights the section that we'll be talking about. Storage providers, of course, are the groups that bring together a ton of storage to provide in the network. This has just been a tremendous large-scale, huge build-out over the last year and a half. It's been, I still remain kind of massively astonished at the level of capacity that the network is able to accumulate in a super fast time. So getting to 16 exabytes of capacity in a year and a half, almost 2 years, is I think an unprecedented thing compared to any other kind of storage network. So this is a super fast build out of going from zero to massive scale, and now kind of getting to be competitive with centralized cloud providers, which is a huge achievement. And this is something that has taken enormous amount of work from thousands of organizations around the world, and it's a huge, awesome achievement. The storage providers are distributed around the world. I love seeing kind of the map change over time, and like different spots appear in different countries, and or sizes of power sizes shift and move from like different locations. We've seen a lot of expansion into many parts of North America and Europe and Southeast Asia. Lots of different storage providers are appearing also in. It's great to spot like a few communities appearing in South America and Africa. There's still a lot more to do there and kind of grow our communities there, but it's really great to see kind of this map expanding over time. And probably the thing that I'm most excited about is just like the speed at which we're now onboarding client data into the network. And so the speed of active on useful data deals happening is pretty fantastic. I'll dive a little bit more into each thing. So just looking at capacity, here's like a profile of the network growing over time. We had this kind of the entire history of the network. Again, 16 exabytes is a massive scale. And capacity onboarding continues to be super strong. It kind of has not dipped down below 20 petabytes a day very long, even through kind of massive policy shifts in China and other places, which kind of significantly decreased the onboarding rate in 2021 in Q3. But still kind of the onboarding rate hovered around 20 for a while, and then now has picked up and is now getting to around 26 to 28 petabytes a day, which is still an enormous amount of capacity coming online in the network. So we've seen many storage providers around the world picking up pace and compounding that growth, which is what's kind of really fantastic about this structure right now is that unlike the hash rate in Bitcoin, there's been no significant decrease in the storage capacity in the network. And this is despite massive worldwide shifts in the macroeconomy, right? So one of the things I want to talk about later is kind of the large scale macro shifts that are happening and how they can impact all kinds of different operations. And what's really amazing here is that the storage provider community in Filecoin just is super strong and continues to grow despite those shifts. And so it's great to see the broader system components working. There's a lot of components in the Filecoin network that are built specifically to absorb these kinds of shocks to the system and make sure that we don't lose any kind of user data or anything like that. So it's been really great to see this working. And huge kudos to folks doing this. So it's really cool to see storage provider growth over time. So this is kind of a bucketed view into different storage provider groups and how they've been growing over time. Kind of like the big highlight here is just seeing how many storage providers are graduating from one segment to another. So here, like this is sort of divided up into segments of like less than a petabyte from 0.1 to 1 petabyte, from that to 10, from 10 to 50, and 50 to 100. And it's really amazing to see all of these graduations over time going from kind of one scale to another. And so growth remains super strong in the community. It's been great. And there's in all networks like this, especially any kind of large scale resource providing network, you always have some kind of churn rate and so on. And with lots of different providers exiting the network, it's been pretty surprising to me to see the rate here being like so low. This is very low compared to many other networks like Bitcoin or Ethereum or things like that. So it's been awesome to see that service providers just are either compounding their growth and kind of growing at a steady pace, or also seeing like large scale investment and build outs. There's been great progress on accelerators for service providers. So there's groups that are making it way easier for people to know how to set up a new service provider. There's a lot of knowledge involved in being successful. So huge kudos to all the people that are putting together the ESPA, which is the Enterprise Storage Provider Accelerator. There's also a lot of really great content that has been put on YouTube that goes in detail. This is kind of like a bootcamp version of the program. So this is a super cool resource for anybody either looking to optimize their operations and learn from the best, or are just getting started in the community. I'm going to flag opportunities throughout the talk in this kind of like blue box. So huge opportunity here for new source providers to attend this kind of accelerator or a similar one. It's a great opportunity for businesses that are providing services to source providers to join this kind of program, to then kind of get a chance to kind of talk to source providers about their services. And it's a great opportunity for also source providers to lean on the success of ESPA and kind of set up either chapters of this kind of thing in your area, or leverage the online content to kind of improve kind of how your community is building out storage facilities in a region. I want to kind of give some quick recommendations for storage providers here. I'll return to this kind of later in the talk, but first and foremost, we need kind of like a very strong focus on kind of excellent onboarding of clients. So this means providing really high quality hand-holding and onboarding of customer data, bringing it online, and providing excellent retrieval speeds. That's been a challenge in a lot of different storage providers around the world, providing both full access and retrieval to all the data, but also kind of providing it at high speed. And especially for large storage providers, really kind of breaking the data onboarding bottleneck. There's a big bottleneck here now with kind of like the super fast growth of data coming into the network. We're starting to kind of like saturate the available link bandwidth between storage providers. We did a group ran a survey recently to get a sense of what the bandwidth capacity of various different links is, and a lot of storage providers are still in kind of like 1 gigabit per second lines or something like that. And so there's I think if those folks kind of upgrade from 1 to 10 or even to 100 gigabit per second lines, you're going to be able to onboard data much faster and be able to kind of absorb the kind of hundreds of petabytes that are coming. And also kind of providing offline data onboarding is really key for many folks, where being able to take in having the operational capacity to be able to deal with data onboarding through offline means where, like, you're getting kind of drives and so on, and having that working can help a lot. Also, kind of in this period of like macro difficulties, and I'll talk about it later, it's really key that service providers manage cash flows well in this kind of downturn, and you kind of like are set up to ensure survival longer term. Like, think of like getting to a 12, 18, 24-month runway, and really kind of like measure your finances and so on, so that you can deal with whatever the macro economy has. And also these kinds of moments, especially in any kind of crypto cycle, can be amazing opportunities for people that are well positioned to then compound their growth and grow much faster than they would in when sort of competition is much higher. So this can be a great time to grow. So again, I'll get a little bit more into detail later, but a storage provider, think of first and foremost getting to really stable operations, and then from there think about how you can tune your operations in this moment to kind of take advantage of the broader systems and kind of grow your operations. Cool. I'll talk briefly about retrieval providers. So this part of the network is still under heavy development. Kind of the first, kind of like the default retrieval provider in the network is the Epifast Gateway, which this continues to be the main way that people access content on Filecoin. And that's been growing super fast over the last year and a bit. It's getting to the point where, like, now there's billion requests per week and growing, with like 8 million users weekly, 8 million unique users weekly, which is huge for sort of like Web3 standards. When you think of a lot of different Web3 systems, the communities are actually much smaller. So this is really great. A lot of this is relying on indexers. I'll get to those in a moment, and really needs kind of fast retrieval from source providers to be able to serve some of that content. Now, of course, the gateway is latency and bandwidth limited, and so this is where retrieval markets come in. So, an opportunity for developers building a retrieval provider network that beats the gateway performance, and an opportunity for SPs to make your content available through indexers, so that then that content that's getting stored in your facilities can be served out to the world. There's a lot of different retrieval projects ongoing. So there's a retrieval markets working group that is supporting a lot of different projects and efforts. There's a lot of things here that you can go look at. There's, again, great opportunities for developers to join a current existing retrieval network project or to start a new one and get a grant. There's a lot of different grants for people solving different parts of the problem here. And of course, for storage providers or people who want to be retrieval providers, this is a great time to start trying out some of the early RP software. There's going to be a lot happening over the next quarter or two. So many of these networks and projects are getting to a point where they're getting to like their large scale. They're getting to the deployment stage. So stay tuned for that, and you may be able to participate in some of the early networks. The Retrieval Markets Working Group has a Builders Day that all with video recorded and put on YouTube. So you can definitely go check out there. There's tons of different projects that solve many different parts, and really exciting to see how these deployments are built, the success cases. There's a really cool dashboard that already shows kind of the different latencies from different networks and kind of how they're working. And there even is a good like payment channels network getting set up, which will be super useful for retrieval providers. Great. Moving on to content indexing. So a huge part of making content on Filecoin available and useful to everybody is being able to index all of the data that's in the deals and being able to provide it for retrieval. One part is the DHC, so like being able to kind of advertise things through the IPFS DHC and get it, which is kind of the IPFS gateway sort of relies on this. That's working well for folks that are sort of publishing content there, but of course the DHC is not large scale enough to be able to handle the scale of data that Filecoin has. So over the last many months, there's been, I guess, a year now. There's been this network indexer project that shipped in the last quarter, which then has a large scale record provider ingestion system to be able to provide super low latency delivery of who has what content and so on. And since it's launched, it is now kind of ingesting billions of records. It doesn't have a ton of participation yet from storage providers. So this is something that if you are especially participating in Filecoin Plus and providing data storage to clients that want that data to be retrievable, hook up to the indexer so that you can make all that content retrievable, and so on. This is going to be a much bigger part over time of the network, and we'll see over time how this can really make all of the content that's been added to Filecoin over the last year and a half, and especially the super fast onboarding that we have at the moment, make all of that content super useful to a lot of groups. And so here are some opportunities for storage providers. Provide your content through the indexer, and for anybody building retrieval networks or applications that require kind of like low latency retrieval, lean on the indexers and use this tool to get really fast lookups. So there's a number of people working on building UIs and apps on top of the data sets that have been added to the network. This is so instead of kind of like looking through things in the DHC, definitely look at the indexer for the records. I'll give a quick look at storage clients. So this is the stuff that I'm most excited about in the last few months. It's just been amazing to see the growth on just actual storage getting used in the network. So we've pushed past 80 petabytes of data use, which is massive. This is much larger than any other decentralized network ever, and well beyond all of the Web3 data use in all applications. So now this is starting to onboard traditional Web2 data and archival data and so on. So it's a great sign of like how how successful the Filecoin network is set up to be. So this onboarding rate is amazing to see. And the graph that I'm paying the most attention to is the new committed deal in terabytes here, which is kind of shows day by day the amount of data being added into the network. And so we're now passing about 600 terabytes. So I'll talk about both of these graphs in a moment. So yeah, like I mentioned, 80 petabytes of live data. This is massive growth. And you can see this shifting hugely at the end of kind of from the beginning of Q1 this year. So Q1 and Q2, we just saw this huge growth going from around 20 petabytes stored to 80, which is fantastic. The largest decentralized storage network by a large margin. This is larger than many successful companies that do storage. So there are many cloud storage or object storage companies out there that all they have is kind of somewhere between 20 or 50 petabytes of data. So this is amazing to see that like Filecoin in just a very short time has been able to kind of pass this level of growth. Be amazing to get to past the 100, 200 petabyte scale. I think we'll be in really great shape. And again, the most exciting thing is not just the raw storage use, but how much is growing per day. So this is probably the most one of the coolest things to look at is just how much storage is getting onboarded on a daily basis. So we're passing 600 terabytes per day. This is huge. Think of the scale of many other storage networks. We kind of are adding many times over the entire size of those storage networks in one day, which is really, really awesome. And we've seen some spikes going up to like even a petabyte per day of data onboarding, which is really fantastic. Let's keep this number growing. We want to get to something like 5 petabytes a day, and eventually kind of 10 petabytes a day to get to a scale where we can properly compete with centralized cloud storage providers. So getting to that scale is going to require a lot of systems and tools to improve over time, and I'll cover a few things about that in a moment. So some opportunities for SPs and for kind of people doing business development around the ecosystem, sourcing more clients. There's already kind of like this large scale pipeline of clients that are interested, but always being able to source more, because even that pipeline is going to start onboarding and then eventually want to leverage that success with those clients to then attract even more clients. Really make sure that clients have great user experience as they're onboarding. So you want those clients that are bringing their data to the network to be super excited to be using Filecoin and to be using your services and to be able to recommend them to many other people. So you want to make sure that those clients have a great user experience where their problems are solved really well, and they can then kind of recommend to the world for people to use Filecoin and for people to use specifically your source provider. So you have a very strong incentive there to make sure that they're having like a really great experience with you, so that you can get a lot more clients over time coming to you. There's a ton of data that is trying to get onto the network and trying to onboard. There's on the order of a couple hundred petabytes of data use that wants to sort of onboard onto the network, and that's through things like proofs of concept and groups that are already kind of onboarding their data, but they're still kind of on a pathway to kind of onboard it. So there's significant kind of bottlenecks in getting that data online. I'll talk about different strategies for improving that. But this is, there's a lot of kind of opportunities here for groups to kind of increase the onboarding rate for their SPs or for the broader network. So if as an SP, you're doing well with Filecoin Plus and getting a lot of data and so on, but you're kind of hitting your bandwidth capacity limit. Think of upgrading your internet connection to be able to absorb more data, or think of setting up some kind of offline ingestion pipeline where people can send you drives and you can kind of do the onboarding directly and manually and so on. That's how we can get to this kind of 5 petabyte a day or 10 petabyte a day eventually. I want to kind of maybe highlight a few use cases in kind of the archiving world, which I think are super amazing. So there's many hundreds and depending on how you slice it, many thousands of different data sets stored across the Filecoin network. There's all kinds of really valuable, useful data, and those successes are getting leveraged to bring in even more clients now. So again, there's visibility to hundreds of petabytes of data that want to come into the network. Here's an example of the kind of sort of setup that some participants are testing out Filecoin through, like they have their own existing data center structures, and they're now running kind of pilots to bring on 10s to hundreds of petabytes into the Filecoin, test it out, see if it works really well for them this year, and if so, then be able to commit and bring in even more data in future years. And many of these players have exabyte level problems. So there's a lot of data of people that are looking pretty seriously at using Filecoin to solve their problems. But we need those proofs of concept to work really well for them and have really great user experience, so they can then commit like that further capacity. There's also some super interesting use cases around archival of public data sets. So think of data sets that are either civic in nature or that are community oriented in some way. Filecoin can be an extremely good use case for those kinds of data sets. There's been a few pilots with different communities, especially different governments and cities. Bringing that data online in a public commons sort of way is something that centralized cloud systems are not good enough for. And this is leaning into the advantages of Web3 and leaning into the advantages of a decentralized storage network. So finding more use cases like this would be really great. Improving the quality and outcome of each one of these use cases will help bring more. So think of cases like this and think of improving the tooling and visualizations and so on, and kind of improving how useful and valuable this data is once it's brought into a common structure. That'll help bring a lot more data sets over time. Could go on for a while, and like all the different kinds of data sets that people are onboarding. There's a lot of really exciting stuff. Maybe I'll give a special mention to Slingshot, which is a program that has been evolving a lot and adding new programs like Evergreen and so on to kind of keep onboarding large scale data sets and make them really useful. So right now there's Slingshot is in a kind of data accumulation and aggregation phase, and this is just bringing a lot of really useful data sets into Filecoin. Getting this data to be retrievable really fast is really key, and especially being able to kind of look into the data sets and being able to pull out specific segments of that data. That's what's going to enable people to build applications and user interfaces and so on, and make this data super useful to the broader community. So this is, think of this program as something that's going to compound the utility and value of the data over time, but really requires getting super high quality retrieval over the data sets and kind of the intermediate bits across the network. I think right now it's super useful to kind of lean on archival use cases and kind of focus on nailing the success case for those. So use cases that require immutability, that require verifiability, where geographic distribution is a huge part of the equation, where being able to give a huge cost reduction is such an important improvement to many people that they then choose Filecoin over any other even centralized cloud storage networks because of that cost. So lean into the advantage, because right now as a new network, there's hundreds of features that the cloud has had 20 years for centralized cloud providers have had on the order of 20 years to build out. And so as we're building out, as the broader community is building out those features, we need to lean into advantages that make Filecoin win for customers. And so here's where large scale data sets, where archival is kind of like the main use case, is like a really good sweet spot, because that means they won't require as many features as many other data sets might require, and they will be super cost sensitive, because those large scale data sets, storing large scale data sets gets really expensive in centralized cloud systems. I'll mention something about kind of the storage on-ramp systems, which have become super useful. So this is these different applications and services that help aggregate a lot of different kind of data and then prepare it to bring it to storage providers. The reason these are super useful is that they help tune the user experience for a specific vertical, for a specific use case. So you don't end up with having to build in tons of different features into Filecoin itself, but you can now target a specific vertical, a specific use case, build a product for that use case, achieve product market fit there, tune the website, the documentation, the brand, the everything to make that use case really successful, and then kind of do all of the parts of kind of preparing all that data and doing kind of the Filecoin specific parts in kind of the back end of those on-ramps. So this has been a super successful way to bring in a ton of storage over time to the network. And I think it's a really good strategy that we as a community should kind of keep following and kind of double down on. So kind of perhaps like the best example of these kinds of on-ramps is NFT storage. This is a product like super tuned for NFTs specifically. It helped get most of the NFTs in the world onto Filecoin. This is growing tremendously rapidly, has over 65 million NFTs, and so on. And this is kind of like a great way of getting some of the most kind of valuable Web3 data onto Filecoin. Now, it's not a lot of storage in terms of capacity. So this 175 terabytes is not a lot. This needs to get replicated a lot. So you might end up with kind of a few petabytes of use in the network. So it's not large by volume, but this is super valuable data that a lot of people in Web3 care a ton about. And so they're building many different kinds of applications using this. And so it's a perfect use case to show kind of the broader Web3 community how to do something like really, really well, and how Filecoin can be super useful to everybody. So it's been a super successful project. Another one like this is Web3 storage, which is kind of building on the success of NFT storage and broadening that to many other use cases. This is also a phenomenal success as an on-ramp. This is tuning for a different set of use cases, kind of more developer focused and so on, also growing super fast and having a ton of success. And this is kind of like a newer product, like less kind of has been growing for less time, also growing super fast and accumulating a lot more storage. S3 is another great on-ramp that has been pulling in a ton of data sets from many different communities and domains. This is much more used by specific communities trying to onboard specific kind of data sets and whatnot. And it's been great to see the onboarding rate. There's a new one that I'm pretty excited about called the Big Data Exchange, which is kind of leaning into this model of using auction models for kind of like how to bid and win kind of a storage data contract. And so definitely go check this out. I think this is the use of this thing is likely gonna, or platforms like this is gonna grow over time. And I think it's gonna be pretty useful over the next few months and a couple of years to see this kind of use case. I think this has a lot of possibility to turn Filecoin into a fantastic force for good, where groups that are curating super valuable data sets can get both super good high quality UX of onboarding their data into the network and potentially getting funding along the way. Filecoin Plus has been super successful and has scaled really fast in the last year. So the program has been developed over the last since the beginning of the network, and a lot of improvements have landed on the network over time. It's been amazing to see kind of the huge ramp up with now large data notaries and so on coming into the picture, and now scaling the data cap use and scaling the onboarding of data into the network. And so it's been huge kudos to the whole community and the project here, because it's been a huge driver of the data onboarding success that we saw earlier. Now I'm going to give you some opportunities for on-ramps. So I think right now there's a huge opportunity for somebody to make a video storage on-ramp for Filecoin. So this means building a product kind of like NFT storage or Web3 storage, but tuned for video specifically, and be able to kind of solve all the hard UX challenges to when it comes to onboarding video into the network, and then providing really fast delivery of the video and any other kind of post-processing and whatnot. So this is a super useful on-ramp and use case. This can, of course, generate a ton more data coming onto the network, and so I think this could be super valuable. A similar on-ramp for data archives and scientific data sets or large data use and so on is also kind of missing. So I think this is also a great opportunity for people building products. So building an on-ramp dedicated to onboarding large archives will be super useful. And this might mean leaning into specific product requirements that those archives need in terms of encryption, or in terms of access controls, or in terms of licensing and so on, or getting verifiability over how the archives are getting distributed, or other features that archives might require. So I think this on-ramp is very much would be super useful to the network. Then a third one that I'll mention now is one dedicated to developer assets. So making it dramatically easier to use Filecoin to store package manager registries or container registries or VMs and so on, and getting developers around the world to be able to use Filecoin as a large scale data commons for their application development, I think would be super, super valuable. So I think these tend to be problems that are community oriented in nature. And so it's a great fit for Web3 tech and a great fit for Filecoin. And it will then cause an improvement rate to come to Filecoin, because if a lot of developers start using Filecoin in their day-to-day application development, they'll want to come into the ecosystem and build out. They'll encounter opportunities for applications and problems along the way and so on they want to fix. And so this would be a phenomenal way to grow the network. And maybe kind of like the last one that I think I'll mention here, which I think would be super, super, super valuable, is to kind of take into account this kind of really, we went from kind of not onboarding a lot of data over time to now onboarding a ton of data every day. And now we're hitting the kind of on the wire bottlenecks. So kind of the next thing ahead in that story is to be able to do large data on-ramping and onboarding, kind of sidestepping the internet. So this means kind of going offline or kind of being able to kind of move drives. So taking inspiration from kind of old long-standing distributed systems or computer networking realities that, at the end of the day, you can't beat the bandwidth of a truck driving down a highway with loaded up with drives. This is how all the centralized clouds onboard massive scale data sets. They do it physically by moving the data, not by transferring it over the wire. And Filecoin went from like not needing to do this like 6 months ago to suddenly like now being in dire need for something like this to emerge, because the data onboarding rate is just that fast and the interest is that high. So I think this presents a huge opportunity for developers of tools to kind of lean into this and figure out a good way to onboard these large scale data sets into the network. So that means learn from things like Snowball and Databox Heavy from Azure and so on, and be able to kind of create products like that can provide really high quality onboarding for the network. You might be able to use products that already exist in the market, so you can lean into Seagate's data transfer as service or the live cloud devices. This would be like a simple way to start and prototype and test out the product. Kind of lean into this, set up kind of teams in different regions, and then be able to kind of onboard the data and kind of work with clients on one side and SPs on the other, and so on. So this is like a really good business opportunity for folks to think about. So again, kind of like very concretely, it means looking at the distribution of storage providers around the world, and the clients. We need to do some work as a community to kind of aggregate that data and make it much easier for people to see what the opportunities are. But then kind of developing devices and teams to be able to kind of onboard the data for people and kind of move these large scale data sets into the network. Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some upcoming projects, and then I'm going to turn to questions. So FEM is one of the things that I'm most excited about. It's bringing finally smart contracts and computation over state into Filecoin. We're leaning into EVM compatibility and with a kind of a WASM hypervisor underneath the hood. There's a lot kind of that goes into this. We're also kind of really thinking carefully about cross-chain calls to be able to make Filecoin super useful to other chains and be able to kind of interconnect to other blockchains. And then over time, this is a very important foundation to be able to do large-scale chain scaling. The FEM project is advancing super fast, and there's a ton of improvements happening. The current milestone is milestone 1 is going to be landing in the next few weeks, and it's a huge huge shift to the network that's going to bring in the full FEM-based actors into the network. Is going to be introduce a new gas model that'll get activated with this milestone. So it's a huge kind of improvement, and already there's a set of early testers and developers that are using the SDK to start building their applications, and that's a super good opportunity. So opportunities for developers is to kind of be among the first new generation Web3 apps that leverage Filecoin and the FEM, and kind of join the early builder program for that. And so this is, I think, a great time to kind of build out those systems and test out those applications, and then kind of be ready to launch your application once FEM comes live with a network. The time for exactly when FEM is going to live is unclear. I think right now the team is targeting something like Q3, Q4. It's unclear exactly the timeline. It depends on a lot of features along the way and how much the early developers, how easy the SDK is for them and so on, because we want to make sure that there's a really good developer experience there. So definitely like help test that out and help get it to like a really good state. I think that the sooner we can get the FEM shipped into the network, the more amazing applications are going to be in the network. One of the applications I'm most excited about once we land FEM is being able to do compute over data. So this means being able to kind of create schedulers and systems around Filecoin to be able to support computational networks around the network. So this means, you know, when you think about a storage provider and kind of their facilities and the storage they have and the hardware they have and so on, it's perfect to be able to then run a computational cloud around all the data they're storing. From my perspective, there's going to be many different computational networks because the different feature requirements that people have in terms of privacy and verifiability yield very different cryptographic approaches. So you end up with very different protocol schemes with different security properties, different computational complexity, and different hardware. And those requirements are going to yield very different decentralized computation networks that are all going to need to kind of interoperate with each other and then kind of use the same storage network to store the data. So I think this means that Filecoin will be an excellent home for decentralized computation networks. And you can think of a lot of those as kind of like L2s on top of the Filecoin L1. We can think of like networks that do kind of like optimistic computation or MPC or fully homomorphic encryption or zero-knowledge proofs and so on, being able to leverage the data storage on Filecoin and be able to kind of do large-scale data pipelines and so on. If you're interested in this use case, definitely check out the Bacalao project. And there's a Compute Over Data Summit that you can check out where there's talks that go through kind of the complexities of these use cases, how to get started and so on. But one of the things that I think is going to be super fascinating next year is a lot of decentralized computation networks coming online around the data that's being accumulated. So think of today using programs like Slingshot and the data onboarding to bring online super large scale data sets that are really valuable to many users and customers. And then once they're onboarded and online into the network, then these decentralized computation networks can take advantage of those data sets and to provide a lot of utility to many users and kind of bring all of that into play with smart contracts. So think of like use cases like onboarding some really large scale important data sets. So think of, I don't know, like geospatial data and so on, bringing that onto the network. And once that's on the network, you can start exposing that to smart contracts and kind of large scale computational jobs that then aggregate their outputs and then pose those outputs into the network. So that all that kind of stuff I think is super compelling and valuable long term. So this means also huge opportunities for developers. So that means you could be among the developers to build one of these decentralized compute networks on top of Filecoin. So this is a super promising opportunity. You can get started on this now, build it out over time, test it out, and kind of be ready to ship this as soon as FEM lands. And of course, that's a large scale project, so it'll take time to grow. And for SPs, once these decentralized computation networks arrive, you can lean into them and use them to augment your revenue flow. So think of being able to kind of supercharge the utility of the data that you're storing and your offering and so on by being able to lean into these DCNs to augment your revenue flow. Kind of in the horizon after that, there's kind of scaling chain state and computation. So this is getting to, I think we need to get blockchains in general to this kind of ability to be able to run most Web 2 workloads. So that means billions of transactions per second or trillions of transactions per second, which is many orders of magnitude larger than what the rest of the blockchain space is targeting. This is a large scale effort that's going to take year or 2 years to get there. But I think this kind of thing is like super critical to be able to then use blockchains and Web3 systems to handle every kind of like day-to-day use case. So when you think of social networks or video applications or personal storage applications or any kind of like large-scale data pipeline thing, you start needing this kind of throughput. So I think the Web3 world will finally kind of cross the chasm and get used around the world once we can break through these barriers and scale computation use to the scale. Yeah, so I'll touch on the developer ecosystem. I'll talk about kind of macro market conditions, and then I'll kind of get to questions. Filecoin is one of the largest networks with most developer adoption. It's been awesome to see the community grow over time. There's a ton that goes into this, everything from kind of just the developer experience, the tooling, the SDKs, the documentation, the tutorials, events, summits, hackathons, and so on. So it's been amazing to see all of the work that people are doing across the ecosystem pay off, to see this kind of long-term accumulation of an amazing developer community. There's a bunch of like really cool use cases that people are building. So things like consumer-oriented storage, like with different kind of applications tuned for personal data or for websites or things like that. There are amazing use cases around video and audio, so video players and video SDKs, or audio players and so on. There's a ton of interest around NFTs. Of course, the last year and a half has seen massive growth in that space. Everything from applications building on top of NFTs or new interesting uses of NFTs. So things like filters for video or video itself and so on. Of course, NFT storage has been a huge key to this whole picture for the developer experience. So huge kudos to that team and that product for building like a super easy way for developers to get started. And this kind of on-ramp is super key to enabling developers to have a good experience. I'm pretty excited about like the next generation of NFT things. So I think like video is going to be a really big part of the equation. I don't think we've begun to see that impact. So I think over the next year or two, we might see video NFTs scale. We might also see 3D spaces and 3D virtual worlds and games really come into the NFT market as well. Everything from kind of like all of the items and the rooms and the worlds and the items and the stuff around avatars and so on. All of this stuff is going to get wired up with NFTs and structures like that. And all of that is going to require really high quality data storage and distribution. And so it's a phenomenal use for Filecoin. I'm super excited about any kind of like metaverse use cases here. It's been amazing to see the development over time of many different applications and tools. One to watch for is Mona, which is super fascinating. It kind of like turns an entire 3D room into an NFT that you can kind of trade, but then you can start to make programmable. I think this is going to be super fascinating over the next year or two as programmability enters these kinds of environments, and you're able to kind of play games or play or have like social experiences and so on within these environments. And as you kind of think of like the composability of these systems and kind of generating more data and so on around these are like phenomenal use cases for Filecoin. I think all of these things can be put together to build kind of an open metaverse for the world. And I think this is a super compelling vision for the Web3 ecosystem. And we might see a lot of build out towards this over the next year or two. Of course, this is a long-term trajectory. So it's going to take many years to kind of realize that vision, because building an open metaverse is a huge undertaking. But I think if we can kind of keep pushing the frontier on this, in kind of every 6 months, every year, we'll see really great successes. I also want to highlight the super amazing results of the builders funnel around the Filecoin network. So there's this whole kind of entire builder and developer funnel helping groups of developers access resources and SDKs, then be able to kind of form their projects around hackathons, and then from that get access to next step grants to kind of support their growth into an accelerator or something like that. And then from there, go on and graduate to be able to be connected with investor communities and so on, to be able to raise funding for their application. It's been amazing to see the results of this builder funnel. So you can see the growth here over time, where many companies have like gotten started, gone and scaled and progressed through many rounds. And so it's been amazing to see the success so far. Huge kudos to everybody working on this part of the ecosystem. And it's a huge testament to the success of the network. So, watch a lot of these companies over time. I think over the next year or two, we'll see amazing things come out of them. So this also presents a bunch of opportunities for for the community. So first, for developers, you can join the hackathons and build on Filecoin. For potential founders, you can start a company in the Filecoin ecosystem. You can get access to resources like the next step grants to try out building something, get connected to accelerators, get connected to ecosystem investors, and so on. And of course, investors, you can find all of these startups in the Filecoin ecosystem and invest the ones that you feel are compelling and you think might be very successful. And all of these opportunities can generate a super successful, thriving environment. We're seeing the success of this already in this graph, but I'd love to see that kind of grow throughout this year and next year. And speaking of hackathons, there's a ton that have happened over the last year and a half, and there's many more upcoming. And the one that I'll pitch for you is HackaFest is starting in July, and this is a month-long hackathon. Definitely check it out and kind of apply to hack at the program. One of the really cool thing that's happened is kind of tuning into enabling a lot of other participants in the network to build out tooling and systems for the network. So there was a really cool experiment that has now graduated into a full-on application and company to kind of match people around the world and connect them to projects in Web3. And this is Radius. Radius is a kind of work-oriented matching platform to enable builders around the world to kind of learn and develop their skills, get connected to projects, and then from there be able to work on those projects and earn rewards for doing so. And these are like pretty significant large-scale kind of contract work opportunities. So this presents a super good opportunity for developers, designers, product managers, operations, entire teams and companies to work on really exciting projects and get paid to build Filecoin with the rest of the community. So this is a phenomenal opportunity. It's also a great opportunity for teams to kind of that are kind of bandwidth constrained and need to hire or need to get more help to post projects through this program to hire other people in the community to help you out. So this is a new and exciting platform that I think will grow a lot over time. I want to talk a little bit about macroeconomic climate because I think it's affecting a lot of people over time. Of course, this is a massive scale thing happening around the world, and so it's good to touch on it a little bit. Now when I super disclaim this, many people don't tend to talk about these things publicly, but I think it's valuable too, especially for many participants around the community that are like struggling through any kind of economic downturn or something like that. Now, of course, like none of this is financial advice, and all of this information is general in nature, publicly available, and so on. So I want to talk about kind of like world economy briefly, cryptocurrency economy, and then Filecoin in particular. So looking at the world economy, you probably have seen a ton of news over the last 2 weeks of a ton of things going on and kind of like stock markets falling and whatnot. But it's really important to kind of keep this in context of the massive growth that we've seen in the world over the last decade. It's been an incredible growth over time. So any kind of like large scale correction here, really kind of like look at it in context of the broader picture. So this is going to kind of squeeze out a lot of over leveraged groups and so on. And it's going to be kind of like a difficult thing for the world to kind of transition through. But always remember that there's been massive amounts of growth over the last decade that have been kind of just seen tremendous growth in the network. So in the broader world. So whenever you see kind of like news about like some company like their stock fell like 20% or 30% or 50% or whatever, remember that many of those companies ended up growing like 200 or 300% in the last 2 or 3 years. And so a lot of this correction is kind of just addressing and correcting some of those valuations. Now, of course, any kind of like macro downturn impacts the cryptocurrency world as well. And we also saw the huge Luna blow up in the last few weeks. It's pretty amazing to see kind of like a problem of that scale not impact the cryptocurrency community much more than that. I think in many other industries, a problem of that magnitude could actually translate to much larger scale problems around crypto. And again, of course, like the media and market is like full of like news that are very kind of short-term oriented. And of course, like it's easy to look at that. However, kind of remember that this is kind of in context of a massive amount of growth and scale in the broader landscape and the broader kind of when you think about it in kind of the multi-year or decade landscape, the cryptocurrency world has been growing a ton over time. It makes sense to sort of like look at it in the log scale, and you can see here this kind of like really helps smooth out the curve and kind of understand the longer term growth opportunities that are coming to crypto. So think like like I mentioned when the Filecoin network first started, like really think resilient, think of long term, and really kind of like be well set up to weather any kind of like these upswings and downswings. Crypto has been very cyclical in the past. It's unclear whether that will continue, but it's easy to kind of like look at the past and kind of be prepared for all outcomes. Be prepared for like the worst case outcome. Be prepared for the best case outcome. And kind of like really look through the whole kind of broader climate and kind of as you're running a source provider or a startup or a community or whatever. Really remember these kinds of things tend to be highly volatile and end up being really think long term and be well set up to kind of weather any kind of problem. I think it's super useful to think about this in terms of kind of like past cycles. So Filecoin's not old enough to have gone through these past cycles. So I'll kind of like use Ethereum and Bitcoin as an example. This is kind of like what a past cycle in the 2017, 18, 19 cycle looked like. We saw like massive increase in ETH and then massive drop afterwards. And of course, all of this is in context of later on, a few years later, a whole other cycle like that. And so again, it's really difficult to know at all or predict any of this. But it's kind of like you can learn from things that have happened in the past and be able to like not think short term or not think in the moment, but really think of this larger term thing and be always super ready for any kind of like important downturn. So there's a lot of people writing about this and talking about this in the last few weeks, or like resurfacing really good blog posts from. I highly recommend the blog post from Brian Armstrong from Coinbase or from Fred Ursum. Both of them posted like these really good articulations of just what it's like to work in the crypto space many years over time, and kind of seeing the kind of like upswings and downswings over time. And so when you if you're running a community or running a company or something like that, like just really take these swings seriously and kind of like be prepared as a community and as a company for kind of whatever scenario you're in. So you want to be kind of like be well prepared for growth when the rest of the market is growing, and be well prepared to kind of last a long time when the rest of the market is kind of on downswing or kind of longer term oriented. Bitcoin is kind of a similar kind of picture. Like you can see in that same cycle, kind of Bitcoin massively growing, massively spiking down, and kind of like having these huge upswings and downswings for a couple of years. And like that amount of volatility is huge and massive. And when you think about like this impacting the miners of the Bitcoin community and the kind of like hash rate graph behind the scenes of this, that kind of like swung up and down through a lot of these periods. And what you want to do as a service provider is not be exposed to all of that kind of problem. You want to be able to kind of like manage your finances well, manage your cash flows, and be kind of like well set up to be able to kind of like ride through these kinds of problem scales and come out much stronger on top. So one important thing here, like in all of these downswings, there were many miners and operators in both Ethereum and Bitcoin that managed to kind of like set up like really good finances for the long term, really good survivability, and then kind of like benefited tremendously from these cycles. So it's one of these things where like definitely like be very long term oriented, be very resilient. Remember that there's a lot of volatility in the space, and the entire crypto market is not immune to macro climate. So whatever's happening in the macroeconomy is going to end up impacting the crypto landscape. And yeah, of course, like here, Bitcoin, you can see like the same kind of like shifts from like the last cycle to this cycle. So like in all cases like this, in any kind of macro downturn, the crypto community tends to turn to building and really many of the amazing new projects and many of the amazing new applications and so on in the crypto space usually get built and generated in a lot of these downturns, because they become really useful moments to focus, really useful moments to kind of think about what's next, think about what's coming 6 months, 12 months, 18 months on the line, and then kind of work together on building that future. So many of the really important use cases of blockchains and crypto and so on have come out of these like down cycles and focus times. So really kind of like it's the future is like super unpredictable. You want to be prepared for like whatever outcomes may come, and really lean into being well set up to operate and to kind of like build for the future. I want to talk a little bit about Filecoin and the Filecoin economy specifically for the network. So here are some like recommendations I have for SPs. So first and foremost, like I was mentioning, kind of think about stable operations, think about managing your cash flows in an economic downturn. Make sure that you can ensure survival. Think of like 6 months, 18 months, 24 months runway. Think about the growth that you want to do in that period. First and foremost, you want to be achieve like really good stable operations. But in those moments, it can be really great time to grow and compound your operations. And because a lot of things will, with any kind of macroeconomic downturn, all kinds of things get cheaper. And so if you're well positioned to grow, this can be a phenomenal time to sort of compound that growth. But of course, you only want to lean into this if you have like really good survivability. A mistake that I've seen many startups make over the last decade, and many groups in across technology and different industries, is just kind of like get over leveraged in kind of like an upswing, and then struggle really hard in any kind of downswing. And then they lean too fast into growth, and they don't have the runway. And at some point, kind of like fundraising gets hard, and so on. And so you want to be really well set up to kind of survive long term and have a good position. But then whenever you can, like really lean into the growth opportunities that present themselves, because I think a lot of super successful SPs and applications are going to come out of this down cycle. But it sort of like really depends on you making sure that you have like good, you're managing your cash flow as well and are well set up. It's also, if anybody's kind of like struggling in these moments, it can be really useful opportunity to join forces. This is in any kind of like cycle like this, you see many different groups kind of eventually kind of cutting costs and so on by joining together and kind of like instead of competing, you end up kind of being able to kind of tackle things together. So this is an opportunity if you're like, just know that like if you're like things are difficult for you, just talk to other people in your community or in your area or whatever, and you might find other people that like you can join forces with, and you end up sort of coming out stronger out of that. I also recommend for storage providers to really participate in Filecoin Plus. This is going to be really key to maintaining kind of profitability and so on through any kind of like large scale macro volatility. So really this means store great data for clients and help source a lot of really great clients. Like I was mentioning earlier in the talk, there's an enormous amount of demand for Filecoin storage and a ton of data wants to come online. And a lot of those pipelines are getting kind of opened up and onboarded and so on. So it's a really great opportunity for a lot of storage providers to then tap into those data flows and really have like a good data experience for folks. It also can be a really great moment to kind of think about any sort of secondary business models you might have. So I've heard a lot of people talk about sealing as a service. So being able to like participants that have a lot of sealing hardware could actually seal capacity sectors for other parties or even seal data sectors for other parties. So this could be like a great secondary business model to augment revenue. It might be kind of starting to add some of the decentralized computation networks. It might be a retrieval mining and retrieval market oriented stuff. It might be other applications, or take some of the knowledge that you've perfected over time with your storage provider knowledge, and then kind of enable many other SPs around the world to kind of leverage your knowledge by kind of like you can run accelerator programs or help support them or help invest in them or whatever. So I think there's many opportunities here in this moment for SPs that are like kind of like long-term oriented and growth oriented. But again, like really make sure that you have like really good stable operations. Go look at your cash flows and so on. I want to kind of like talk a little bit about kind of like just kind of economic indicators. All of this is public data you can find on the Starboard website. By the way, huge kudos to the Starboard team for making such good data flows. It's like super useful to be able to look at all this data. So I think a few things to call out here, like it's been amazing to, like I mentioned at the beginning, seeing kind of the massive sector onboarding continuing throughout this year and kind of strengthening and increasing. Amazing to see the amount of kind of new committed data every day and kind of breaking the 600 terabyte barrier and kind of growing from there. I think this is super amazing. A lot of people kind of like have asked a lot of questions over time about kind of like how all of these things interrelate. So I think if you sort of like stack these graphs and you can see kind of the time frame between them, think of like the sector onboarding and capacity onboarding or even Filecoin Plus onboarding of data translating into a certain amount, like locking a Filecoin over time and just changing the percent of circulating supply that's happening. So if you see kind of the distribution in the graph over here, what you want to, what the network sort of, where the network sort of wants to be is around kind of like 50 or 60 petabyte of capacity onboarding, or 5 or 6 petabyte of Filecoin Plus onboarding. So I think the network getting to that spot will kind of like shift the trajectory of a lot of these other graphs in terms of the data locked Filecoin and so on. And so we want the network to sort of get to a spot kind of like in the middle of these graphs, and that's sort of like a good economic dynamic. And so the kind of like the big thing to focus on for the whole network is this kind of new committed deal terabytes per day. If we can get that to kind of like 5 terabytes or 5 petabytes or 10 petabytes per day, that'll be a phenomenal place to be. And that's a lot of data onboarding, which is exactly what Filecoin is for. It's for storing large scale data for a lot of users. So it's super, the economy is super in line with kind of like the broader utility of Filecoin for the network. So kind of like think of breaking bottlenecks in onboarding. We want to get back to the onboarding rates of like 60 petabytes a day, or 60 petabytes a day of capacity, or 6 petabytes a day of Filecoin Plus deals, because there's like this 10x multiplier on there. So this means Filecoin Plus deals, of course, is better than capacity, because that is much more aligned with the network's goal of storing really useful data and so on, and will help a lot of the clients and customers that are coming online that want to store tens or hundreds of petabytes with a network. So it's a great opportunity for service providers to kind of like lean into this. Think of data sets that you want to bring online. Think of those archival use cases. Think of the many customers around the world that want to bring their data online, and think of how your source provider facilities could be used for that. One big thing here is like, I really think we need to start breaking the bottlenecks in both bandwidth and offline onboarding. So if you're an SP and you're maxing out your bandwidth link, consider upgrading, because that's going to bring you way more data and way more Filecoin Plus deals and so on. And so think of like that onboarding pipeline being really important to your business long term. So think of like whether it is like upgrading to kind of like 10 gigabit per second lines or 100 gigabit per second lines that can just absorb a lot more data over time, or lean into onboarding of data through offline means, where you're kind of like have the operational capacity and flexibility to be able to take in disks being delivered either by package in like small packages with disks, or in kind of like these larger pods of petabyte scale data transfer services. So I really think like the Filecoin network will keep growing with tapping into kind of like the capacity of the internet, but we'll sort of like max that. The onboarding rate that we have now is going to max that capacity, even if we upgrade a lot of the lines. And so we want to get to a point where we build out anyway those kind of like mobile units to be able to onboard very large scale data sets, and kind of like have that entire. If we work on those systems now, they'll sort of be ready in a quarter, 2 quarters, or 3 quarters, something like that, right when we need them. So I think it's important that people look at both the opportunity, because that's going to be a phenomenal business for somebody who can figure it out well, because kind of like clients will want to be able to use the network. Storage providers will really want the data, and so somebody kind of like can make that opportunity. Make a business out of that opportunity, they'll be able to potentially make a lot of money with that. So really consider kind of this opportunity to help have really high quality onboarding of the data. For anybody who wants to try that out, definitely like reach out to folks if you're interested in giving it a shot, and kind of like get connected to storage providers and storage clients that want to move large scale data. And it's really important that when you think about building this product, you focus on providing a super high quality user experience. Really good user experience matters tremendously here, because how the clients perceive that, like the people coming online to bring their data to the storage providers and to the network, how they approach the customer relationship and the clients and so on, it's going to kind of like set an impression for the whole Filecoin network. So the groups that are going to be the most successful, and they're going to be hired again and again and again, and are going to make a lot of money and so on, are the groups that have super high quality customer experience and can really focus on building that as an amazing part of the product. this is one thing that I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about, and kind of like trying to get ahead of like this data onboarding problem, where like as we keep the network growing, we're going to hit like these kind of bottlenecks, and so it's a super good opportunity. Finally, I kind of like want to give a little bit of advice to kind of people building startups and developers. So for people building startups, same thing as with storage providers. Really think about stable operations, manage your cash flows in any kind of economic downturn. Make sure that you can be kind of like default alive. There was a really good post from the YC community that kind of goes into this and kind of how to think about fundraising in these kinds of moments, and how you want to think about extending your runway and all that kind of stuff. So really make sure that you can ensure survival and kind of like most groups say something like 12 to 18 months. I would think just in general, 18 to 24 months is a much safer structure. Really kind of aim for that and think of being able to lean on kind of investment programs and grant programs and so on from the community. Especially if you're doing anything kind of Filecoin or IPFS related and so on, you can come to the builders funnel and kind of lean on the programs there, the accelerators, the ecosystem investors, and so on. And you really want to get to profitability. So be lean, do not overspend, think about like cutting costs in a bunch of places, and kind of like really get your business on a path, on a trajectory to being cash flow positive. And if you can do that, then and you're on a good trajectory there, you'll be fine. Now for developers that haven't yet kind of like started a company or anything like that, this is and who there's going to be in the macroeconomic world, there's kind of like all kinds of companies and so on that will kind of like downsize workforces and so on. The good news for you is that in general, technology, and especially the crypto world, is going to continue growing. There's a ton of capital in the space. Most groups and most projects and so on are going to keep growing. They have a ton of needs. They have like amazing opportunities to build. And so my prediction is that a lot of the work in the crypto space is going to continue, and it's going to keep actually growing, not shrinking. I know lots of companies right now that instead of like slowing down their hiring, they're actually accelerating it because they're seeing the opportunities of like other larger companies downsizing workforces, enabling a lot of really great talented people to join their network. So really kind of in this moment, lean into finding many other teams in the network that want to grow, consider joining one of those teams, or potentially go look at some of these now new Web3 oriented work platforms where you can kind of find really good projects and really good opportunities for you to kind of work with other groups in the community, build out a system, and kind of work in a more Web3 native way where you're working kind of like on a contract structure and so on. It's kind of mediated by the network. So like I mentioned earlier, these downturns tend to be the best time to build. So it tends to be that amazing things come out of these cycles. So if you ever wanted to kind of like play around with metaverse oriented things, there's probably a ton of grants related to that. If you ever wanted to kind of play around with different kinds of applications with media or applications with large scale data analysis or any kind of like, if you think about leveraging the amazing utility of a network like Filecoin for good in the world, think of like being able to provide a super high quality and cheap storage to so many important use cases in the world. Like there's massive scale data sets that are vital to the scientific community or vital to many civic communities and governments and so on. They're really commons oriented data sets. And because of that, they tend to be underserved by private companies around the world. And so this is a great opportunity to kind of like bring the magic and utility of Web3 and Filecoin to help safeguard those data sets and help make them super useful and valuable. I think there's going to be a lot of build out over time, over the next year or two, in user interfaces around really valuable data sets. So maybe think of like if you're looking for project ideas and so on, I recommend kind of like joining one of the hackathons. You'll get a ton of ideas that way. Or go look at the Slingshot data sets and think of building user interfaces for those. There's going to be like a ton of work over the next few months to like make it really easy to use. But I think we'll come out with one of the most compelling and super interesting data science platforms in the long term. Great. I think with that, I'll maybe flag some upcoming events and then get to answering questions. I'm sure I'm taking a lot longer, so hopefully this was useful and helped answer a lot of questions. But huge kudos to everybody kind of organizing the community over time. There's been amazing to see many events like the Build Space India workshop, Orbit. The Orbit program has had a ton of like community events around the world. There was a really awesome conference in Lagos. Super cool to see this happening. There was a sustainable blockchain summit around South by Southwest and a lot of other Filecoin presence around there. There was a huge showing at ETH Amsterdam and DevConnect and so on. This was an amazing set of events. So huge kudos to the community for putting a lot of this stuff together. A lot of us went to Paris P2P as well. Also a really cool event. And I want to kind of invite everybody to come together in Phil Austin, which is happening very soon in June 8th. So if you're interested in going there, definitely take a look at the website. There's an amazing lineup of speakers and community events and whatnot. And I'm sure also you can host side events if you're interested in kind of gathering the community for something around this date. It's a great opportunity to kind of host a special purpose event for a subset of the community, whether it's storage providers or clients or developers in some specific area. Definitely let us know if you need any support and you want to organize something like that. Then also think of HackFS coming right after that. For the whole month of July, there's going to be a ton of activity in this broader hackathon. A ton of amazing startups today that are kind of post Series A and building amazing technology around IPFS and Filecoin came out of HackFS. So this is the third time that it runs. Definitely check it out, and it's a great opportunity to meet other developers and product builders and then build something. And then Phil Singapore is around the corner in August. So this is going to be a huge community event as well. Definitely reach out to the organizing group if you want to host side events and so on. There's going to be a huge community event. Hope to see you everybody there. I'm really excited to be joining a lot of the community there. And I think that there's also interest in creating a Phil Japan later in early September. So if people are interested in that, definitely flag it. Cool. Well, that's it for me. I know there was a lot. Sorry for going a little bit over in time, but hopefully that was useful. I'll now maybe Stefan, turn it over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, great presentation. Thank you so much. Let's go through a couple of questions. We'll keep it short. Maybe the first one from Val. Hi, Juan. Val from Foreverland here. Thank you for the presentation. There's a thought that level of acceptance of Web3 right now is like the level of acceptance of the internet in 1995. What do you think about that? Or what do you do about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that's true. It's true and false in two ways. So I think it is true that by kind of proportion in the world, not a lot of people are using Web3 yet, and there's still kind of confusion and so on. So yeah, it does make sense to map it to kind of the 90s when only a small fraction of the world was using the web and so on. But when you think about it from absolute numbers, there are millions to tens of millions of people already using Web3 dApps and so on. And beyond that, there's, I think, hundreds of millions that have either hold some cryptocurrency or use NFTs in some way and so on. So I do think that crypto is much more diffused into the world. And you also don't need that many large communities to have massive impact. Tons of incredible projects have been built by small groups of people, tens, hundreds, thousands of people working together can build massive scale systems. I also think that a lot of the way that Web3 is going to go is that it's going to change a lot of underlying structures and infrastructure. And a lot of people are going to start using Web3 without even knowing it yet, where it's just sort of going to come online around the applications and services they already use. And then sort of one day they'll realize, oh, I'm using a Web3 application. And that will kind of happen pretty fast. Past technological revolutions follow this kind of logistic curve kind of adoption, where for a long time it's kind of slow. You have this acceleration rate, and at some point you hit this tipping point where it diffuses really fast from the kind of early majority all the way through many more people, and you get to the later majority. So I think the best thing that we can do is to improve the tech and the products to be super useful to people around the world. And especially right now, really useful to developers. We want it to be the case that when a developer is thinking about building an application, Web3 is just easier and better for them than any other option. And I don't think we're quite there yet. It's still really hard to develop with smart contracts. It's still really hard to develop with a lot of the tools. And so I think right now, Web3 developers tend to use Web3 because it confers a special advantage, and they have to deal with disadvantages. As we kind of double down on those advantages, and we kind of improve the kind of mitigate the disadvantages, we'll end up in a much better spot. And then that way we can basically like get Web3 to cross the chasm, and the rest of the world can use Web3. I think Stefan might be having difficulty, so I'll try to like see another question. I see Phil Singapore is waiting for you. Yes, I'm super excited to be there and super excited to see many of the community there. So definitely like if you're in this call and want to get together with the community, definitely come out to that. Definitely come check out the website and the lineup. If you want to kind of like, again, host a side event and so on, like definitely do that. I think it tends to be extremely useful in these kinds of communities to have these broader participation events organized by many folks. And yeah, also a huge plug for Phil Austin coming up like very soon, like in I think 2-3 weeks. So yeah, see everybody there. I think it's going to be super exciting. A lot of stuff going on. Here's a question from Chaitanya, I think. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Who do you see as Filecoin's competitor at the moment? I think like the real competitors for Filecoin are the centralized cloud providers. So we want to be able to compete with those kinds of operations. They're massive in scale and they're super well positioned and they have huge moats, but that's what the real competition is. When you look at all the other kind of decentralized networks or other kind of peer-to-peer systems, so there's two things to think about there. One is just think about the scale. Filecoin is just kind of in a totally different scale than everybody else. Like we're adding 600 terabytes of user data every day. We're adding 20 petabytes of capacity daily. Like that's bigger than many of those other decentralized storage networks are in total. And we're adding that every day. And then in terms of developer community and so on, kind of ton of developers are building with the hackathons and so on, and that's growing. So I think from that perspective, I really think like the stronger competition is kind of the centralized cloud providers. The second point is groups in crypto shouldn't even be competing. Like we should be working together to fight against the centralized cloud systems, and we want to diffuse Web3 and decentralized storage networks into the world. And so we should be competing much more. We should be collaborating much more to compete against those cloud storage providers. And think of that as a very long-term competition. So when the clouds first started, there were kind of like late 90s, early 2000s. There were a lot of other ways of doing computing that were kind of think of traditional on-premise self-managed facilities and so on. And the cloud was like a confusing new product that came in over time and had to kind of like build out a lot of features and prove a lot of things before customers started using it. It wasn't really until kind of like late 2000s, like 2006, 2008, 2010, that a lot of companies started really trusting the cloud systems, and then from there kind of like scaled up, and the big large cloud scaling that we've seen happen in kind of like the 2010 2020 era. Like that's when like the massive amount of diffusion happened in a lot of companies around the world, and service providers and so on migrated from their private deployments into the cloud. So decentralized storage networks will follow a similar trajectory. Like Filecoin will follow a similar trajectory. At the beginning, it'll start with kind of like Web3 oriented use cases and early adopters, and we'll kind of like prove out a lot of the features of the platform, and a lot of the we'll kind of like flesh out the qualities of the storage network, and it will stress the limits, will improve all of the features of the product, will break bottlenecks, will improve customer experience, and so on. And that'll happen for like many months to years. And then at some point, like we'll hit on the inflection point where the advantages of decentralized storage networks are just going to outcompete the disadvantages of the centralized cloud, and we'll have the same kind of like disruptive innovation and like fast diffusion. But in order to get there, we have to like really perfect the qualities of the product and get to extremely high quality user experience. So really think long term as the big competitors are being the kind of the centralized cloud providers. I think I tend to try and think of positive sum dynamics and how to get to highly collaborative environments where different groups can like work together to solve a problem. So I think getting to a state where the centralized cloud providers find it really advantageous and profitable for them to join decentralized cloud networks, like that would be a phenomenal way to kind of like judo move the whole space into kind of like winning. If we can create an environment where even the centralized cloud providers prefer to be in a decentralized cloud setting, sort of collaborating in an open mediated network, I think that would be a huge win. I doubt that'll happen for like the biggest cloud providers. Like I don't think the top 3 centralized cloud providers will want to give up their huge margins and their very strong moats and so on. But think of like the cloud providers 4 through 1,000. All of those centralized cloud providers will operate better together, banding together into a large network, and then together compete against the really big ones. And so I think like there's a lot of possibilities there for centralized cloud providers that are not the biggest to kind of like join a community or network like Filecoin. And think of that as a very long-term competition. It's not a short-term thing. It's like and you shouldn't think of like comparing the metrics in the short term. You should be thinking about perfecting the qualities of the product and perfecting the feature set, and think of applications being used, applications being built on Filecoin and growing. And that's kind of like where our focus should be for the next few years. And then at some point, once we get to like truly massive scale, we start getting maybe closer to zettabytes. At that point, then it's a serious competition with centralized cloud providers. Great. So moving on to the next question. Any connection between Filecoin Plus data use cases and the FVM? Yeah, totally, absolutely. So I think I think the community has learned a lot about the kind of like Filecoin Plus onboarding program. I've seen a lot of people kind of reaching the same conclusions that we need kind of some kind of different types of service being kind of rewarded differently. So many customers want archival use cases, which are different from like fast retrieval use cases. Some users want private storage, private encrypted storage. Some users want public storage, public unencrypted data. Public unencrypted data is really useful for any kind of community application development. So there's kind of like more utility to the Filecoin network of bringing public data uses than private ones. So maybe those should be rewarded differently. Like maybe you can have like a different kinds of multipliers in terms of rewards depending on the different features of the data. And I've seen this kind of different threads of conversation happening across the Filecoin Plus community. And so I think all of that is going to be super interesting to watch. And of course, like all of that data that's coming online is going to be you're going to be able to compute on it with the decentralized computation networks that I mentioned, especially the public data is going to be much easier to work with at the beginning. So yeah, there's a huge tie-in to all of the data that we're onboarding now through Filecoin Plus becoming really useful in kind of like think of that late this year and next year through being able to run functions over all of that data, kind of mediated by things like FVM and so on. Chat here from Malaysia. How do you see yesterday's? Sorry, I can't comment on that. I haven't seen. I think there's a lot of in any kind of community, in any kind of crypto network. There's many different actors, many different communities that do many different kinds of things. In all communities, there's usually some parties that are like doing things that some groups will disagree with, and there will be some repercussions for that. It's the same kind of thing as storing content that that in one area that some jurisdiction does not like or something like that. It's the same kind of thing. Like participants in some area should really kind of like follow the regulations of that area and should kind of set up operate well within your jurisdictions and your countries and so on. And if you want to operate differently, then consider moving and relocating your operations elsewhere. I think we saw this kind of like last year when the sort of like news broadly came out that like, hey, in mainland China, there were going to be like just kind of the country wanted mining cryptocurrency operations and so on out of the country. Many operators took that moment to kind of relocate and migrate their operations and facilities outside, and they went to other countries. They went to places like South Korea and Japan and Singapore and Australia and many other in North America and South America and other places. And so I think those operations now don't have these kinds of problems. So I think it's one of these things where different community participants will take the risks that make sense for them. And I really think those operators should like think about what's best for their communities and themselves and so on, and really should kind of operate as well as they can. Hey Steven, great to see you. Thanks for the comments. Yeah, the performance is a very strong challenge, especially when we have FVM. Do we have further plans to improve performance from consensus or architecture point of view? Yeah, let me actually go back to, let me actually show you slides from a different presentation that I think you might find interesting. And I think this presentation is now online. I'll find the link and send it to you. Let me know if you can see the compute over data vision and goals. Yeah, I think you can see that. So I won't kind of like give you a whole other talk right now, but maybe I'll just flag a couple of things. Once FVM lands, that kind of like sets up like the smart contract facility to then be able to do the next part, which is kind of enable computation over data. And so think of like being able to add schedulers there to be able to do the larger scale computation over data. And I think there's basically two pathways here. One pathway is to build these kind of like data pipeline type systems. So this is where like the Bacalao project and many other many other projects are kind of orienting towards, where you can use the FVM to deploy a task scheduler, and then that task scheduler can then issue work to other groups. And then the other approach is to kind of like lean into the hierarchical scaling properties. This is going to take a lot longer because this chain scaling stuff is not going to kind of be productionized for some time. It's we'll see how long it takes, but there's another approach here where you can, as we achieve chain scaling in kind of like this tree oriented way, this gives us like kind of very large scale scalability, where you can just keep hanging many more contexts underneath a tree, so you can get to a point where the kind of nodes in the groups sort of at the bottom of the tree could be running very large scale computations, and so you can kind of aggregate the computing of all of those parties. So I think that there's these two very promising, two important promising directions for how to do compute over data. Kind of going back to the triangle for a moment. Actually, before the triangle, like this is the target, right? So this is kind of, I kind of want to get like a more updated 2022 graph for this, but this is a visualization that I found online. This is the scale of computation that Web2 operates in. This is how many objects and operations happen. And so this is where we're headed. We need blockchains in general, and we want Filecoin to be able to operate at this kind of throughput and this kind of scale. So there's a lot of things that we need to build to be able to operate in this kind of spot. And so when you think about like scheduling and so on, think of like structures like Borg or Kubernetes or Lambda and workers and so on, and think of kind of deploying what is technically kind of like the scheduler, like Borg master or Kubernetes master, into the FVM as a contract, and then from there issuing work out to kind of like worker nodes and whatnot. And I think that structure, coupled with verifiable computation, so any of the zero knowledge tools that have appeared, things like the Lurk project is a great example of being able to do this. That is going to kind of enable verifiable computation over like large scale data. So think of once we have those schedulers deployed, then we can kind of do that kind of thing. And to maybe like complete the picture on the triangle, I think basically like performance, verifiability, and privacy are these three parts of the triangle that are like really hard to square. And there are many different technologies that optimize for one of these. And so you end up with like very different approaches that are going to kind of mean very different performance profiles. And that will also lead to different cryptoeconomic structures and different product offerings and different brands and so on. So my sort of prediction here is that I don't think a single computational network will be able to leverage all of these different technologies and do a good job. I think we're much more likely to see many decentralized computation projects that tune for one of these technologies and perfect that. And we're going to get there much faster by kind of embracing those differences. And so I sort of really expect many different systems to emerge. And so that means when I think about this, this is where really leaning into kind of using Filecoin as an L1 for many different computational networks is kind of what we want to do. So think of bringing in this structure where we can use Filecoin 1 as a layer 1 and then kind of enable a lot of different L2s to sort of operate on top.
Awesome. Sorry, I was disconnected, Juan. Thank you for picking it up when I came back in. I know we're
no worries.
45 minutes over time. Thank you. Maybe one more question or so, and then we can close it off. That'd be great. Let's see. What's your plan for bear market survival for the project to be alive? I think everything we're doing here today, right? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I mentioned, I've been around the crypto space since 2012, 13, and I've seen many different cycles. I think we as a community, as a project, are really well set up for this crypto cycle. I think, what I'm doing today of kind of leaning into talking to SPs and other groups about really making sure that you manage your own cash flows and you're really well set up with runway long term is going to be really important. I see any kind of crypto downturn as a great time to build and to kind of double down on growing the feature sets and growing the utility and so on. It's a really good time to focus. It usually is very useful because a lot of kind of distraction stuff kind of disappears and it enables a lot of teams to kind of focus and build. It also sometimes means that whenever some project or some company isn't working out or is not going to be able to survive, that's a great opportunity for our teams to kind of lean into meeting those teams and kind of bringing them into the ecosystem and kind of aligning with them. So I really see it as a phenomenal time to build. I think so many amazing technology companies and technology groups get built and get perfected over these kinds of downturns. The most important thing though is if you're running an SP or you're running a startup or something like that, really think of runway and really take it seriously because these kinds of downturns shift very quickly, and so you want to be able to have that runway so that you can continue operations and kind of remember that the competition for talent in the crypto space is still going to be high. So a difficulty there for a lot of startups especially is going to be that while there's a downturn and fundraising is hard, at the same time, my sense is that the talent market is going to continue being really hot in the crypto space because there's a ton of capital that has been poured into it for the last year or two. And so that means it'll be especially difficult for companies that have to compete on offers that are really high for really talented folks, and at the same time have trouble fundraising. So that'll be a double threat for startups. So really recommend kind of in that case leaning into groups and people that really believe in the long-term vision and the mission of the ecosystem and the network and your particular company, and really kind of lean on managing good stable cash flows and not accumulate too high of a burn. If you accumulate too high of a burn, that'll be rough. Sorry, I can't hear you, Stefan. I think you're muted.
And that's what we're doing here at Protocol Labs as well, right? As building all these new tools, as you've seen through the ecosystem. So yeah, lots of good questions today. Thank you so much. Lots of opportunity, and I appreciate everyone participating. Juan, thank you so much for spending the extra time, almost an hour over time. So it's always good to hear from you. And looking forward to many more of these, and hope to see the audience at Phil Austin or Phil Singapore for a more in-person conversation. So, and with that, we're finishing off this AMA for today. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.